Okay, so today we're talking about ethics as compared to law. So if you're comparing ethics with law, what do you think is different? Okay, so law is generally considered to be the minimum requirement, and obviously we've always, it's always been expected that directors will follow the laws and not obviously. I think it's quite interesting when multinational companies go into different countries and they don't necessarily know the laws all that well. Have any of you, can any of you think of any little stories that, you know, if suddenly you were a director in a country like Singapore, do you think you would suddenly have to do a lot of reading up on the law in that country? The corporations law is probably a little bit different in Singapore, I'm not too sure. But you might find yourself in a fairly interesting. The other thing is, I suppose, I mean, you could get legal advice, but yeah, so you know, actually making sure you comply with law can sometimes not be as simple as it seems. And as I say, I've actually heard of stories where people are working in multinational companies, get transferred, and then suddenly have to know the legislation of that particular country. Sometimes there's also language difficulties, so it can be interesting. Basically, should directors just simply comply with law, or should they comply with ethics? Or do you think if they comply with law, they are actually complying with ethics? Any comments? Okay, do you think law is always ethical?
No.
No? Okay. And you probably can think of examples? Absolutely. And this is why you actually sometimes get people put in prison who are actually more ethical than the people who've actually put them into prison. So these are the kinds of situations that we sometimes come across. Ethics is generally considered, yeah, and sometimes, you know, mostly law is considered ethical, but, you know, we certainly can think of examples where it hasn't been ethical. Ethics is generally considered to be a little bit, you know, more than just the minimum requirements of legislation. So if you're a director and you're just following those basic legal requirements, you probably are being unethical to some degree. In fact, I was listening to an article, actually reading an article that was saying that something like 40% of directors of companies know of something that's unethical or that is actually going on in their company. But they are under so much pressure to produce on a financial level that, you know, it kind of gets ignored to some degree. Okay, so the prime intent of corporate governance is to maintain shareholder confidence in the companies. And we will talk quite a lot about internal controls. But basically, ethics, I think these days most people actually require directors to be ethical and not just simply comply with laws. Okay. If one obeys laws, will this always result in ethical decisions? And I've already asked that question, and I've already had an answer. So law arranges society's customs and values, compliance with legislation sets the minimum standard for ethical conduct, and breaking the law does not necessarily mean that conduct is immoral. I'm not obviously encouraging you to go and break the laws, and in most countries the law is regarded as moral. But we do have people who simply cannot observe certain laws being implemented, and they will do something because they regard those laws as being unethical. What reasons do you think may cause an employee to compromise his ethics at work? So we all come across these kinds of ethical dilemmas. I don't know if you have at any point. Interesting, I think the philosopher Immanuel Kant basically said that regardless of what culture we're from or what background we have, we all have a kind of innate understanding of ethics, and we all have a basic kind of commonality on certain issues. So even if you're brought up in a particular culture and someone does something and they do it all the time, you're going to feel a certain level of discomfort, even though you've seen it being done all the time. You have this kind of underlying sense of what is right or wrong. Okay? Does anyone want to comment on that? So, you know, we know that ethics, my ethics is not necessarily the same as your ethics, or, you know, even amongst you, your ethics might be different depending on your culture and background. But according to Immanuel Kant, he basically had the belief that we all have a level of commonality regarding certain issues in ethics, certain topics, okay? We all have a basic kind of discomfort if certain things are done, and regardless of our culture, regardless of our background, regardless of our age, okay? We might just put up with it, you know, and that certainly happens, but we don't feel comfortable about it, okay? So yeah, go back to the question there, we kind of got a bit of a topic there. What reasons do you think may cause an employee to compromise his ethics at work? Okay, any unrealistic targets? I don't know if you've experienced any of these things. Bonuses. We know that bonuses can motivate employees to act inappropriately. Culture of a business. Certainly, they say that people are very influenced by what is going on around them. So on a personal level, they might not do that at home. But if they're in a situation where this is considered acceptable behavior, they probably are, well, they're more likely to actually, you know, go along with that behavior. A lack of clear rules. So if you're actually not sure what you should and shouldn't be doing. And codes that are not enforced. So we know, we hear of codes of conduct. But sometimes those codes of conduct are kind of tucked away and you never really know about them or hear about them. And you certainly don't see them being enforced. Any comments? Shall I switch that off so that you can actually comment? Okay, so what is ethics? Moral rightness? Someone you know, asking me the question, are morals the same as ethics? I'd say there's a very strong similarity. Factor having the most influence on a person's decision-making is his or her ability to judge moral rightness. The higher a person's moral development, the less dependent that person is to outside influences. So that the more you actually know your own values, the more you have thought about these issues, the more strong you feel about what you know and you know what your values are, the less likely you are to be influenced by what's going on around you. Okay, it's the people who haven't actually, you know, don't actually know what they believe, who will be very easily influenced by people around them. So the more you know yourself, the more you know your values, the more you are likely to behave autonomously and ethically. Okay, spot the spelling mistakes. So just to have a break from my voice.